So we're getting very close to the Packers 53-man roster being announced, and I want to go through in this video and explain my Packers final 53-man roster prediction. I put this out on Saturday night after the preseason game. You may or may have not come across it. I put it on my community tab on YouTube, just in writing. I also put it in my Packers newsletter, which some of you are subscribed to, where I used to write in the past couple of years. And I also put it on my Twitter account, LukeBeller3. So you may or may have not seen it by now, but I figured I would explain a little bit about the decisions that I made for this Packers 53-man roster. And so we're going to start off here going position by position. And at quarterback, we have Jordan Love and Michael Pratt. There has been a competition between Pratt and Sean Clifford for this entire training camp, and it felt like to me that Sean Clifford came in having the upper hand because of the experience he has, the fact that he's been here a year longer than Michael Pratt. Michael Pratt is a rookie. I assume that Clifford would have the upper hand to start camp when you already have all that extra experience that Michael Pratt doesn't have. And then throughout training camp and preseason, Sean Clifford honestly, didn't look that great. He was okay at times, other times not as great. And I just expected to see a little bit more considering he's been in the NFL for a year. Of course, during the season, he doesn't get real live game snaps, but I just didn't see too much improvement over last season, and I almost was more excited from what I saw last preseason from Sean Clifford. And I also think Michael Pratt looks really good. He wasn't perfect, made some bad throws, especially had a bad interception in the game on Saturday, a few days ago. But I believe that Michael Pratt is a more talented player. I think he has a better long-term future. I think that Clifford still could have a little more experience when it comes to his understanding of the playbook, things like that. But I just think here you have to go with the more talented guy. I think Michael Pratt is more talented. I think that he is a better thrower of the football. He throws it a little quicker than Sean Clifford. So that's why I went with Michael Pratt in the Packers keeping two quarterbacks. Now here we are at running back. This position is a little bit complicated, and the reason being that we don't fully know the extent of the injuries to Marshawn Lloyd and A.J. Dillon. Marshawn Lloyd has a hamstring injury. A.J. Dillon has a stinger, and there is uncertainty as to how long they're going to be out. And one of those guys could potentially start on the IR. I was doing some reading, and I think there's a rule where going into the season now you can put two players on the IR, and that could sort of be the situation here with running back. And so that's why this one's a little bit more up in the air. But I went with Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, and Emmanuel Wilson. I think that Marshawn Lloyd, no doubt if healthy, will be on this roster. He's a third-round pick. You're not going to cut your third-round pick. And then there was, of course, the battle between A.J. Dillon and Emmanuel Wilson. I think that we didn't really see too much of A.J. Dillon this preseason outside of those bad runs, but it was mainly because the offensive line was playing really poorly. The defensive line was clogging up the holes, pushing the Packers' offensive line around in those few snaps that A.J. Dillon had. But Emmanuel Wilson, once again, had a very, very good preseason. I believe he had the second most rushing yards in the NFL among running backs during the preseason. He's such an explosive back. I think he's a really good running back. I think he's a better runner of the football than A.J. Dillon. And so that's why I chose these three guys here. And I'm going to say that either A.J. Dillon is on the IR potentially. Lloyd could be. I don't know the extent of his injury. But if not, I think that Wilson should make it over A.J. Dillon. So that's my take there. Now receiver. For a little while we have been debating, or lots of people had been debating, including myself, whether they would keep 6 or 7 just because of how good Grant Dubose played in that first preseason game. After the first preseason game, he didn't really produce too much at all. And so because of that, Malik Heath having some nice games, I went ahead with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Bo Melton, and Malik Heath. It's just tough. You don't really necessarily need 7 receivers. And even though it's tough to keep Dubose off of here, I think that Heath kept his spot there. I think in that first game, Dubose sort of made a push for that spot, but I think Heath sort of solidified himself in the past couple games to end training camp here. And then tight end, I have us keeping 4 tight ends: Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Tyler Davis, and Ben Sims. Davis dealt with an ACL injury last year. I think he's a big special teams guy. And Ben Sims also, was on the Packers roster last year. I just think they're going to keep 4 guys here. And so those are my 4 I have them keeping there. Now to the offensive line. I have Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, Sean Ryan, Jordan Morgan, Zach Tom, here's where there's some more debate as to what could happen here. Then I have Andre Dillard, Jacob Monk, and Travis Glover. So I don't have them keeping Kadeem Telfort or Caleb Jones. I was going back and forth here, whether to keep 10 offensive linemen. If I did, I would have had Kadeem Telfort here. But just looking at the rest of the positions on this Packers team, I felt like the Packers should keep 9, and then maybe Telfort can make it to the practice squad unless another team grabs him. I just think when you look at Andre Dillard, they signed him from another team. He was getting a lot of, to start camp, he was getting those first team reps. He sort of fell back from that spot, but I still think he's going to make this roster considering that's sort of where he started. And then Jacob Monk is a draft pick. Travis Glover, also a draft pick. And when it came to Glover versus Kadeem Telfort, I just went with the most recent draft pick considering, Glover was drafted by the Gutekunst this year. I just don't know if he'd really be willing to cut him right now. And he was a 6th-round pick and not a 7th-round pick. And I know the Packers have cut 7th-round picks in the past. And I just don't see them cutting Glover considering he was a 6th-round pick. Don't see it happening. That's my reasoning there. Now to defensive line. This is probably the easiest position. Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, Colby Wooden. Pretty much the same group as last year, and I don't think there was any competition to push there. And then defensive end, I got Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, and Aaron Mosby. So at the end of the group here, Mosby has flashed a lot during training camp from different reports I saw. And he had an insane game in the final preseason game with the sack fumble with which Anthony Johnson Jr. picked up, returned for a touchdown. He also had the interception. And so it was sort of between him or Brenton Cox if we kept here a 5th defensive end. And just with how Mosby has looked and how he looked that final game, I went with the Packers keeping Mosby because he seems like a solid player. And then 2 linebacker. I have him keeping 6 linebackers. Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, Eric Wilson, Edgerrin Cooper, Tyron Hopper, and Christian Welch. Christian Welch, I think, is going to be a big special teams guy. Had a really, really good game this past week in the preseason. I don't see them cutting him. That's why I have him keeping 6 there. Edgerrin Cooper, he's a 2nd-round pick, going to make the roster. Tyron Hopper, 3rd-round pick, he's going to make the roster. And then Quay, Isaiah, and Eric Wilson are they have been starters for most of camp here. So it's pretty simple there. And then for cornerback, got Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Kalen King. So I do have them not keeping Corey Ballantyne. That was one where I was going back and forth at that position. And the reason I left him off, because I was looking at cornerback and safety and trying to figure out, okay, how many players will the Packers keep here? And the reason I left off Corey Ballantyne is if you look there at the top outside corners, we got Jair, Eric Stokes, and Carrington Valentine. And then Corey Ballantyne did play a lot of snaps last year when the Packers were, dealing with different kinds of injuries. But I think when you look at the fact that a guy like Javon Bullard can play slot corner from safety, and the Packers were playing Keyshawn Nixon at outside corner at times during training camp, I think that if, let's say, Jair or Eric Stokes were to get injured, you have multiple options. You could put Carrington Valentine there. You could put Javon Bullard in the slot and put Keyshawn Nixon at outside corner. And so because of that flexibility, that's why I left off Corey Ballantyne. If Bullard didn't have that ability to play slot from the safety position where he's listed at, then I probably would have been more likely to keep Ballantyne. But with that ability to put Nixon outside, that's why I left off Corey Ballantyne. Then Kalen King was making some nice plays. I think he has some good upside there as a Packers draft pick. So that's the reasoning there. Then safety, I have Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Keaton Oladapo. The top 3, pretty easy. Xavier, of course, he was the biggest free agent addition. Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, draft picks who are going to be the top 3 safeties. And Anthony Johnson Jr. has been playing really well, especially the last preseason game. And then Keaton Oladapo, the fact that he was a draft pick from the 5th round, the Packers are going to keep him. I don't see them releasing him. And so that's sort of the reasoning at that spot. Then to end it, we got kicker Anders Carlson. So in my preseason recap video, I brought up Anders missing that 32-yard field goal, and I was debating if that maybe lost him the job. But the more I thought about it, this is my prediction of what the Packers will do, not necessarily what I would do personally. And we've seen the Packers be willing to hold on to guys for a really long time. And I think the Packers have been so bought into Anders Carlson. They didn't move on from him during last season, during the struggles. They continue to talk him up. And I just don't think that they're going to risk moving on from him right now. I just have a feeling that of these 3 kickers, considering Greg Joseph didn't really surpass Carlson when you look at camp, that they're just going to stick with him. I don't know if it's the best idea. I just have a feeling they're going to stick with Anders Carlson. Maybe they check around the NFL to see if other kickers are available, because I know that some kickers could be released on the teams that have 2 kickers. So that's a possibility. But to start off, I just have a feeling inside that they're going to keep Anders Carlson. Then at long snapper, we got Matt Orzak, pretty simple there, and punter Daniel Whelan. So that is my 53-man roster prediction. I put it out Saturday night initially, but here's the explanation for it. And so if you guys want to see the official roster, I'll release it tomorrow or share it and give my reaction whenever it does get released. So make sure you have the post notifications turned on. You can also follow me on Twitter, LukeBeller3, for more Packers content. I also have a second NFL channel where I touch on non-Packers topics, which will be linked at the top of the description. So if you want to go support that channel, subscribe, and you want to hear my non-Packers thoughts, you can check it out there. Today I talked about Drake May and the Patriots sort of QB situation they have going over there, trying to figure it out with a first-year rookie quarterback. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.